A young woman with long, dark hair stood on the sidewalk, a moving truck behind her. She held a piece of paper, her new address. A man from the moving company yelled at his coworker to hurry up. As the truck pulled away, a woman with short hair appeared, her face etched with anger. "That's your new address," she spat. "Never bother our family again." The young woman stared at the departing truck, the weight of her mother's words heavy in the air. A young woman with short, dark hair walked away from a moving truck with the words "Ribbit Removals" on the side. The truck rumbled down the street, leaving a trail of exhaust fumes. As she walked, the sounds of the city, the vroom of traffic and the distant clack of a train, seemed to close in on her. That day, she thought, I lost my home. With a worn map clutched in her hand, the young woman walked down a quiet street. "Just move to the next place to sleep," she murmured, tracing the chaotic lines marking her temporary refuge. As usual, the thud of her shoes echoed in the stillness as she continued her journey. Girl at an empty lot. For sale sign in 2 languages. She clutched a notebook filled with addresses, another stop in her journey. Rain lashed down, soaking the girl and turning her map to mush. "There's no house," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "No way." Lightning flashed, illuminating her desperate face. "What the hell do I do now?" she cried out, her voice lost in the roar of the storm. The fragile paper disintegrated in her trembling hands, leaving her stranded and alone. The rain continued to pour as the girl stumbled upon a Shinto shrine, its red torii gate standing stark against the gray downpour. Seeking shelter, she approached the shrine, its presence offering a brief respite from the storm. As she stepped under the gate, a sense of calm washed over her, a momentary peace in her turbulent journey. The girl, drenched and exhausted, found herself taking shelter in a small, abandoned shack. Rain pounded the roof and wind howled through the gaps in the walls. Inside, she noticed a few meager offerings left on a makeshift altar. A ripe apple, a package of sweet buns. Her stomach growled, the sight and smell of the food intensifying her hunger. "Drool," she muttered, her eyes fixated on the offerings. Driven by desperation and hunger, the girl snatched the offerings from the altar. Chomp! Grab! Gobble! She devoured the food with a ferocity born of starvation, the sweet taste of fleeting comfort in the harsh reality of her existence. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes as the reality of her situation crashed down upon her. "Why?" she choked out, the question echoing in the hollow silence of the shack. "Is life so unfair?" She curled up on the floor, her body racked with sobs. "I have no home," she cried, her voice barely a whisper. "And no food." Through her tears, the girl saw a figure standing in the doorway of the shrine. A fox-like creature with a mischievous grin stared back at her. "If you're a god, then help me out," she pleaded, her voice filled with desperation. The creature chuckled, its voice a low growl. "What are you looking at, fox?" it asked, amusement dancing in its eyes. Exhausted and defeated, the girl collapsed on the steps of the shrine. "I'm so tired," she mumbled, her body heavy and her mind numb. "I can't move. I give up." She closed her eyes, surrendering to the overwhelming despair. The rain continued to fall, a relentless torrent mirroring the girl's despair. "If I wasn't born into this crummy world," she thought bitterly, the words echoing in her mind. "I could have had a better life than this." She huddled on the steps, the cold seeping into her bones as she surrendered to the misery of her existence. Footsteps echoed on the stone path, the measured step of traditional Japanese footwear breaking the silence. A figure clad in a kimono moved with purpose through the shadows, their face hidden from view. The figure in the kimono paused beneath a traditional Japanese gate, marked with the characters for luck and joy. A man with glasses, holding a newspaper, greeted them. "Oh, long time no see," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. The figure nodded in acknowledgement, their face still obscured by the shadows of their wide-brimmed hat. The kimono-clad figure stepped into the bustling market street, the vibrant energy a stark contrast to the quiet shrine. A vendor, recognizing them, called out a greeting. "Hey, hey, welcome!" he exclaimed, his voice full of warmth. The figure offered a polite nod in response, their attention drawn to the colorful displays of goods. The figure turned, revealing a face adorned with intricate tattoos. A chilling smile spread across their lips. "Watch what you're saying," they warned, their voice a low and menacing growl. The vendor, taken aback, stumbled over his words, his jovial demeanor evaporating. The figure's hand slammed a thick bundle of cash onto the counter. "Just show me to the place," they demanded, their voice brooking no argument, "or I'll end your pointless chit-chat for good." The vendor, intimidated, stammered a reply. "As usual, you're wearing that irritating get-up?" he muttered, nervously adjusting his glasses. "How's business?" "Going well," the figure responded curtly, their impatience growing. The vendor led the figure through a dimly lit room, muttering to himself, "Buying all these folks? What are you aiming at?" He stopped before a specific door, marked with the number 84. "Look, number 84, he announced. "Got a rare one in today." The figure, intrigued, leaned closer as the vendor fumbled with the lock. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from inside. A struggle, a scream. "Arg!" a voice cried out. The vendor recoiled in shock. "Erg!" The figure peered into the room, their eyes adjusting to the dim light. Inside, a young girl sat on the floor, her wrists and ankles bound with chains. Her clothes were tattered and dirty, her face streaked with grime. "Well," the figure remarked, a hint of disgust in their voice. "Pretty filthy, though." The figure tossed several more bundles of cash onto the counter, the thud of each one echoing in the tense silence. "Great!" they exclaimed, a predatory gleam in their eyes. "Oh, paying this much?" The vendor, visibly unnerved, swallowed hard. "Gulp!" he stammered, his gaze fixed on the intimidating figure before him. Outside, on the bustling market street, whispers rippled through the crowd. "Hush! It's Mr. Sagami." People leaned in, curiosity and apprehension mixing in their hushed voices. "The Mr. Sagami from downtown?" A young girl, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination, watched as the imposing figure approached. Mr. Sagami, his face etched with those same unsettling tattoos, approached a group of people. "Hello, Mr. Sagami." They greeted him, their voices a mix of respect and wariness. He gave a curt nod in response, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Suddenly, a young girl with familiar, haunted eyes appeared, her presence startling him. "Where am I?" she mumbled, her voice barely a whisper. A heavy chain rattled ominously from her wrist. The girl's eyes snapped open. She found herself bound again, chains digging into her wrists. "Why am I chained up again?" she thought, panic rising in her chest. The familiar weight of the shackles brought back a flood of fear and despair. She struggled against the restraints, the metal biting into her skin, but her efforts were futile. Mr. Sagami turned towards the girl, his expression unreadable. "What's yours?" he asked, his voice low and steady. The girl, still reeling from her sudden appearance in this strange place, hesitated. "Yahello Sagami," he continued, answering his own question. "That's my name." A flicker of recognition crossed Yahello's face as he looked at the girl. "Asura," he said softly, the name escaping his lips like a long-forgotten memory. Asura's eyes widened, a mix of confusion and hope dawning in their depths. Could this man, this stranger with the unsettling smile and the familiar name, be a key to her forgotten past? Yahello leaned closer, his gaze intense as he repeated the girl's name. "Asura Sagami," he said, each syllable laced with a strange mix of recognition and possessiveness. Asura stared back, her expression a mixture of confusion and a faint glimmer of hope. The chain around her neck, a symbol of her captivity, glinted in the dim light. Asura looked up at Yahello, her expression a mixture of uncertainty and defiance. "I don't know my real surname," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. A heavy chain hung around her neck, a stark reminder of her captivity. Then I can call myself that, right? She asked, a hint of challenge in her tone. Yahello reached out, his hand outstretched towards Asura. You can speak then, he stated, his voice surprisingly gentle. He gestured towards the food he offered. More importantly, food. Asura's eyes focused on the offering, her stomach growling in response. Call yourself whatever you want, Yahello continued, a hint of amusement in his tone. After that, I'll do what you say. Asura's gaze flickered between the food and Yahello's face. And a place to sleep, she murmured, her voice filled with uncertainty. Asura, her hands bound with chains, looked at Yahello with a mixture of apprehension and defiance. I won't go out in public without permission, she stated, her voice firm despite her captivity. And I won't expect to be treated like family either. Yahello listened intently, his expression unreadable as he considered her words. Yahello led Asura across a wooden bridge towards a traditional Japanese building. We're here, he announced, gesturing towards the structure. For starters, he continued, this is where you'll sleep. Asura, still bound by the chain, followed him with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. This new place, like her captor, was shrouded in mystery. Yahello and Asura arrived at the building, a grand house with traditional Japanese architecture. Wah! Asura breathed, taking in the sight. What is this place? This is insane, she murmured, her eyes wide with awe. A house. As they approached, a group of people bowed deeply. Welcome back, Master Sagami. They chorused, their voices filled with respect. Yahello smirked, a sense of satisfaction in his eyes. Welcome back, he echoed, his voice laced with authority. I'm back. Asura gazed up at the house, its intricate details and imposing structure bathed in sunlight. A bird soared overhead, its cry echoing through the air. Is this heaven? She whispered, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. For a girl who had known only hardship and uncertainty, this place seemed like a dream. Asura's eyes widened in horror, her breath catching in her throat. I died, she gasped, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Don't tell me, she stammered, her voice trembling. I died at that shrine? Yahello watched her, a flicker of amusement in his eyes, as if he enjoyed her distress. Asura's eyes widened, a manic grin spreading across her face. I'm free from that unfair world, she exclaimed, her voice a mix of disbelief and exhilaration. That means. She trembled with a mixture of fear and excitement, the reality of her situation sinking in. Whoa! She breathed, the world around her seeming to tilt and sway. Asura's eyes welled up with tears as a wave of loneliness washed over her. I had nowhere to go, she thought sadly. No one would be sad that I'm dead either, right? The realization of her isolation hit her with a painful force. Yahello observed her quietly, his expression unreadable. Yahello looked down at Asura, his expression softening slightly. Relax, he said reassuringly. You're not dead. He paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. You were simply purchased by me. Asura's eyes widened in shock, the reality of her situation hitting her with renewed force. Yahello leaned in, his face close to Asura's, a predatory glint in his eyes. I bought a human, he stated matter-of-factly. He gripped her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. And that human will work at Sagamiya. He released her abruptly, a chilling smile spreading across his face. That's all. Asura stared back at him, fear and uncertainty swirling in her eyes. Inside the grand house, a woman cradled a sleeping child. A human child, she murmured, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The child stirred in her arms, revealing a peculiar mark on its shoulder. Yahello watched from the shadows, a sinister smile playing on his lips. The mark, it seemed, held a significance he alone understood. The bathhouse echoed with the shrieks of startled women as a figure suddenly crashed through the roof. Gaia! They screamed, scrambling to cover themselves. Stop! Get off of me! The intruder, landing with a splash, cried out in surprise. I don't want to take a bath, he yelled, flailing in the water. Outside, a man stood drenched and bewildered, holding a broken umbrella. Excuse me, he mumbled sheepishly. A man burst through the ceiling of a bathhouse, crashing into the water below. Ouch! He groaned, drenched and disoriented. The women in the bath shrieked and scrambled for cover. Oh, crud! He muttered, realizing the awkwardness of his situation. Bad timing. He bowed his head apologetically. Sorry. A man with round glasses and a long nose stood outside the bathhouse, peering through a crack in the wall. You shouldn't be peeping, Mr. Sagami? A woman scolded him, catching him in the act. Nice aim, she added sarcastically. Startled, the man stumbled back. I wasn't peeping, he insisted, adjusting his glasses. And clearly, she is a full adult, he added defensively. The woman raised an eyebrow. Well, she is human, she conceded. Yahello held out a kimono, a sly grin spreading across his face. No way, Asura exclaimed, her arms crossed defiantly. I won't wear a kimono. Yahello's grin widened. With some meat on her bones, she'll be of use, he mused, ignoring her protest. The long-nosed man looked confused. She didn't have the mark, then? He questioned. Yahello's expression turned menacing. What do you mean? He growled, his voice dangerously low. Asura, adorned in an elaborate kimono and a vibrant floral headdress, stared defiantly ahead. Her eyes, filled with a newfound determination, seemed to challenge the world. The delicate details of her attire contrasted with the fierce intensity of her gaze. Yahello tilted his head slightly, his expression thoughtful as he considered something unseen. A mask obscured the lower half of his face, adding an air of mystery to his already enigmatic presence. I see, he murmured, his voice low and contemplative. Yahello, hiding his expression behind a mask, suggested to Asura, Shall we get some air? Asura, draped in an elaborate kimono, panicked. Hyugia, she cried. If I wear this, I'll be sold off, right? No, she yelled, trying to wriggle free. Master Sagami, please help, she pleaded, looking towards the long-nosed man for assistance. Under the watchful gaze of a full moon, Yahello and Asura strolled through the quiet streets, the rhythmic clack of their traditional footwear echoing in the night air. Asura, now wearing a simple outfit instead of the elaborate kimono, walked beside Yahello, her expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The once bustling market street was now deserted, casting long shadows in the moonlight. Yahello adjusted the mask covering his face. You'll get used to wearing them in time, he assured Asura, who glared back at him. I just don't like, she grumbled, trailing off. Says the girl trying to sell my body. Yahello thought to himself, a sly smirk playing on his lips. Asura shifted uncomfortably, tugging at the fabric of her clothes. You like this outfit? Yahello asked, his tone a mix of amusement and curiosity. Asura watched Yahello walk ahead, his figure casting a long shadow in the moonlight. Most adults treated me like a burden, she thought sadly, her gaze falling to the ground. Can't read him, she mused, her brow furrowed in confusion. Why is he doing this? A small pinwheel spun in the gentle breeze, its delicate movements a stark contrast to the turmoil in her mind. Yahello, dressed in a kimono, strolled down a moonlit street with Asura. The rhythmic clack of their geta sandals echoed through the empty market street. Kimono, Asura muttered, her eyes fixed on his attire. Huh. She wondered aloud. Why is he wearing that? Yahello glanced back at her, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. Asura stopped in the deserted street, a sudden gust of wind swirling around her. Huh? She muttered, looking around in confusion. Him? She wondered, noticing Yahiro's absence. Where did he go? She peeked around the corner, trying to spot him. No, she decided, turning back. The wind rustled through the pinwheels lining the street, their spinning blades a blur in the moonlight. Asura bumped into someone, a pained expression crossing her face. Ugh, she exclaimed, clutching her head. What did I expect? She thought, a bitter smile forming on her lips. I'm always getting abandoned. A single tear rolled down her cheek as she grappled with the familiar sting of loneliness. Nearby, a hand reached out, fingers closing around a small, sharp object. A woman with an unsettling smile loomed over Asura. Whoa, careful where you walk now, she warned, her voice dripping with false concern. Very nice, she purred, her eyes gleaming with predatory interest. Very cute. Asura, caught off guard, stared back in confusion. I've never seen your face before. The woman continued, her smile widening. HM? A new girl? From Fujiya? Ikaro? The woman pointed a finger at Asura, a heart-shaped symbol appearing above it. All right, it's decided, she declared, her voice filled with an unsettling excitement. Asura, bewildered, took a step back. Huh, she exclaimed, her eyes wide with surprise. Did you get lost? The woman questioned, tilting her head. Asura glanced down at her own attire, a flicker of self-consciousness crossing her face. What strange clothes, she mumbled. A man grabbed Asura's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. Huh, what the heck? She yelled, struggling to break free. This is a crime, she protested, her eyes wide with alarm. Let go of me. The man simply chuckled, pulling her along. Come on, then, he urged, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Asura, realizing her struggles were futile, stumbled after him, fear and anger battling within her. Asura struggled against the man's grasp, her face contorted in a grimace of fear and desperation. Help! She cried, her voice echoing in the empty street. Anyone! She clawed at his hand, trying to break free, but his grip was too strong. Sagami! She yelled, hoping her captor would hear her pleas. Help me! She screamed, her voice raw with panic. The man, unfazed, continued to drag her away, his expression a mask of cold determination. The woman's face loomed large, her expression a mixture of suspicion and anger. Sir, she began, her voice low and menacing. Did you do something to one of my girls? Yahiro, his face partially obscured by a mask, met her gaze with an unsettling smile. The tension in the air was palpable, a silent clash of wills between the two figures. The woman yanked Asura away from the man, her grip firm. Who the hell are you? She demanded, glaring at him. Surely you know the rules of this district, she hissed, her voice laced with warning. The man, unfazed, reached into his pocket. It's all fine if I pay, right? He offered smoothly. I'll pay. The woman's eyes widened in surprise. Pay? She echoed, a flicker of interest crossing her face. Oh, how wonderful, she purred, a predatory smile spreading across her lips. I accept. Yahiro, observing the scene, smirked. Quit butting in, he muttered under his breath. Asura looked at the man expectantly. Do it, she urged, her voice filled with a mix of anticipation and confusion. Huh? The man responded, startled by her sudden command. Asura turned to Yahiro, her expression hardening. You weren't saving me? She accused, her voice laced with disbelief and anger. Yahiro, caught off guard, simply stared back at her. Huh? What? He stammered, struggling to comprehend the situation. Asura's eyes widened in shock and anger. Give me food and a place to sleep and I'll do what you say, she repeated, her voice trembling with indignation. That's what you told me. Yahiro, his expression hidden behind his mask, remained silent. Sleep with this customer right now, he ordered, his voice cold and emotionless. Then do your job and all will be well. Asura stared back at him, defiance and fear battling within her. The man stared at the money offered to him, his eyes wide with surprise. Clink! He looked from the cash to Asura, confusion clouding his features. Money? He questioned, his voice laced with uncertainty. What's wrong? Asura, her expression a mixture of determination and sadness, simply gestured towards the money. Take it, she urged, her voice firm. Asura sat alone in a room, chewing thoughtfully on a piece of food. If I have money, I can eat my fill, she mused, savoring the taste. If I have money, I can have a place to live. She paused, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. Do I really? She wondered. Want money? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as she contemplated the true value of wealth and happiness. The man approached Asura, his intentions clear. Come on now, he urged. I've paid the fees. Asura's eyes flashed with anger. Huff, huff. She panted, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Clink. The sound of coins hitting the floor echoed in the tense silence. I don't want your money, she shouted, flinging the money back at him with a defiant cry. Asura's face contorted with a fierce determination, her eyes burning with defiance. My body is my own, she declared, her voice filled with a raw, untamed power. If even that isn't possible, then… She trailed off, the unspoken threat hanging heavy in the air. Her resolve was unshakable, a testament to the strength that lay within her fragile frame. With a determined leap, Asura jumped off the bridge, plunging into the dark water below. Leap! The impact echoed through the night, the sound of splashing water mingling with her fading cry.
Gasplos.
She disappeared beneath the surface, leaving only ripples and a sense of desperate defiance in her wake. Yahello watched Asura's descent into the water, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. What do you say? He asked, his voice laced with amusement. The long-nosed man gasped in shock. What? She jumped? Sir, he stammered, turning to Yahello with a mixture of fear and concern. The only response was the steady glub, glub of the water as it closed over Asura's disappearing form. Yahello watched impassively as a figure emerged from the water, their form silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Schwip! The long-nosed man, his eyes wide with disbelief, sputtered incoherently. Are you guys insane? He exclaimed, his voice a mixture of shock and accusation. This ain't my fault. He insisted, throwing his hands up in a gesture of panicked denial. Asura gasped for air, her eyes fluttering open. Ugh! She groaned, disoriented and soaked. Blink! She looked around, her vision blurry. Done. The imposing silhouette of the house loomed before her, its lights a hazy blur.
PLPLN.
With a sudden splash, she was pulled from the water, her rescuer's face hidden in the shadows. Asura could only stare in shock and confusion, her mind reeling from the rapid turn of events. Yahello sat on the bridge, arms crossed and mask firmly in place. The money is in the river, too, he stated flatly, watching the lanterns float downstream. Asura, her clothes damp and hair dripping, stared at him with an unreadable expression. You didn't die, he added, his voice devoid of emotion. Asura, dripping wet and clinging to the bridge's railing, glared at Yahello. NGH? She grunted, pulling herself up. Well, you would definitely die from this height, Yahello remarked casually, a hint of amusement in his voice. Shit, Asura muttered, her frustration evident. Climb, she urged herself, her determination renewed. Asura clung to the railing, her body trembling. No one taught me about this stuff, she thought, her voice filled with uncertainty. I don't know what I should do. She looked down at the dark water, a wave of despair washing over her. But, she hesitated, her resolve wavering. There are things even I don't want to do, you know? A sense of desperation filled her eyes. This is my only choice. Suddenly, a hand reached out from behind and grabbed her arm. Yahiro pulled Asura back from the edge, his grip firm but gentle. You said the human world, he began, his voice surprisingly soft. Was an unfair place, didn't you? Asura looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and despair. Tears streamed down her face as the weight of his words sank in. Yahiro held Asura close, his masked face inches from hers. Then, in this world, he began, his voice low and intense. Could you become a courtesan and start a new life? Asura stared back at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion. The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken possibilities and a dangerous allure. Yahiro gestured towards a group of women, their faces obscured by the shadows of their elegant kimonos. You may choose your own clients, he explained, and gain money and power. He emphasized their status. Courtesans are elite. The women, lined up like silent figures behind a screen, remained motionless, their expressions hidden from view. Yahiro leaned closer, his gaze intense. You might even find people you can rely on, he offered, his voice a persuasive whisper. Asura's expression hardened, her jaw clenched in determination. Become a courtesan, Yahiro urged, his voice taking on a commanding tone. Build yourself a home. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, a tempting offer laced with a dangerous undercurrent. Yahiro gently reached out and placed an elaborate hair ornament on Asura's head. Shine! She flinched slightly at his touch, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Flinch! The ornament, a delicate flower with dangling beads, shimmered in the dim light, a symbol of the new path laid out before her. Yahiro held Asura close, his fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw. His mask, as always, concealed his expression, but his eyes held a glint of something akin to admiration. You could become the star of the entertainment district, he murmured, his voice a seductive whisper. Asura, adorned with the delicate hair ornament, met his gaze, her own expression a mixture of apprehension and a flicker of newfound determination. Yahiro knelt beside Asura, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Above them, a banner bearing the Sagami emblem fluttered in the night breeze. I know you have what it takes to become the best one here, he stated, his voice filled with conviction. Asura, her gaze fixed on the softly glowing lanterns strung across the building, remained silent, contemplating the weight of his words and the uncertain path ahead. Asura stared at the ornate hairpiece in her hand, her expression a mixture of apprehension and resolve. She began, her voice barely above a whisper. Yahiro gestured towards the glowing lanterns illuminating the night sky, a silent invitation to embrace her new destiny. Asura slapped Yahiro's hand away, her expression fierce. Slip! My body is mine and only mine, she declared, her voice filled with anger and defiance. I won't be at someone else's mercy. Yahiro recoiled slightly, surprised by her outburst. Told you, didn't I? He retorted, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. Asura stumbled, her foot catching on the edge of the wooden platform. Ah! She cried out, her arms flailing as she lost her balance. Yahiro reacted instantly, reaching out to grab her arm and steady her. His grip was firm, preventing her from falling. Asura looked up at him, startled, her eyes wide with surprise. Asura reached out and tried to pull off Yahiro's mask. Pull! It won't come off. Why? She exclaimed in frustration. Yahiro slapped her hand away. Gah! It's not possible for you, he stated firmly. Just give up. He tilted his head, his masked face an enigma. In the first place, he questioned, why do you hide your face? Asura's face flushed red as she stammered. It's because you are an ugly and perverted mountain gorilla? Yahiro, momentarily stunned, simply uttered, You-ho! He quickly regained his composure and narrowed his eyes. I see we have to work on your education first, he declared, a hint of amusement in his voice. Asura jumped and grabbed Yahiro's mask, attempting to pull it off. Let me see your face, she demanded, her curiosity getting the better of her. Yahello recoiled, trying to shield his face.
Menace.
He growled, clearly uncomfortable. Asura insisted, "You're my owner. Take off that mask." Yahello, feeling pressured, thought to himself, "An oiran needs not only to have good looks, but also be cultured." Asura, seeing his hesitation, grew more determined. "Oh no," she thought. "I'm getting even more curious." Asura's eyes sparkled with delight as she eagerly devoured the food before her. Munch, munch. She chewed with gusto, savoring each bite. A wide grin spread across her face, her cheeks flushed with happiness. "Ha!" She sighed contentedly, completely absorbed in the simple pleasure of a delicious meal. In a room filled with the clatter of dishes and murmured greetings of Sagami-sama, Yahello sat down to a meal with several masked attendants. He surveyed the spread of food before him, his expression unreadable beneath his own mask. Engulfing, he thought, a hint of anticipation in his eyes as he reached for his chopsticks. Asura beamed, her face radiant with pure joy. Phew! She sighed contentedly, savoring the last bite of her meal. Her eyes sparkled with satisfaction, and a wide, genuine smile lit up her features. The empty bowl in her hand was a testament to the deliciousness of the food and the happiness it brought her. Yahello watched Asura eat, a curious expression on his face. "It's good, right?" he asked, gesturing towards the food. Asura, mid-bite, let out a surprised "ugh." Yahello chuckled. "Just joking," he said, a playful glint in his eyes. "Didn't you think it could be poisoned?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "They do a good job, they're masters, so to speak. The food here is second to none." Yahello lifted a skewer of meat to his masked face. "Flap! You will eat a lot of good food every day," he stated, his voice muffled slightly by the mask. "Becoming an oiran is no different from succeeding," he added, his tone implying a clear expectation of her future success. Asura's eyes widened in realization, her hands flying to her face. "Oirans are the same as these people," she thought, the implications dawning on her. "Masters at pleasing their customers." A wave of panic washed over her. "I can almost see his face," she muttered, her voice filled with fear and anxiety. Yahello, his mask still firmly in place, leaned down and pressed his forehead against Asura's. "I won't be fooled so easily," he murmured, his voice low and intense. "They are not simple slaves like you think." Asura's eyes widened in surprise, her breath catching in her throat. The close proximity and the intensity of his gaze sent a shiver down her spine. Yahello's hand, adorned with long, sharp nails, reached out and gently caressed Asura's cheek. "Reach for," he whispered, his voice a seductive purr. "How about this?" he offered. "If you reach the highest position in Sagamia." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Is that so?" he added, a sly grin spreading across his masked face. Yahello reached up and slowly began to remove his mask, his expression hidden in the shadows. "I will take off this mask for you," he declared, his voice sending a thrill of anticipation through Asura. The air crackled with tension as the mystery of his face was about to be revealed. Asura's eyes widened as Yahello revealed his face. A look of shock and disbelief crossed her features. "Ugly or perverted or a mountain gorilla, just so you know," she thought to herself, her mind struggling to process the sight before her. "I'm not," she trailed off, her voice caught in her throat. Yahello turned away, a faint blush creeping up his neck. "They are talking about it," he thought to himself, clearly bothered by the whispers and giggles. Asura, observing his reaction, couldn't help but be amused. "Ah, he's bothered by that," she realized with a smirk. "A mountain gorilla?" one of the onlookers whispered, adding to Yahello's embarrassment. Yahello, flustered, tried to hide his face. "That I can move," he mumbled, self-consciously adjusting his mask. Asura, intrigued, leaned closer. "What's its deal?" she wondered aloud. Determined, She declared, "Anyways, I want to see." With a mischievous grin, she added, "More like, I will definitely see it, you perverted ugly mountain gorilla." Yahello suddenly appeared before Asura, startling her. "Appear? Whoa!" she exclaimed, taking a step back. "I am not going to escape," she stammered, flustered by his unexpected presence. Yahello crossed his arms, a stern expression on his face. "You can't. Do as you please," he ordered, his voice firm. Asura fidgeted nervously. "Doesn't he know what personal space is?" she thought, feeling uncomfortable under his intense gaze. Taking a deep breath, she asked, "Can I explore the place?" "I calmed down after eating my fill." She rattled the bars of the nearby gate, curiosity overcoming her apprehension. "Rattle!" Yahello pointed towards a room with an elaborately decorated door. "The koi room," he announced. "Ah, that's right," he added, as if remembering something important. "There's an important guest there," he explained, his tone serious. A woman nearby overheard and bowed respectfully. "Sagami-sama," she greeted him. Asura paused, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. "That's all right? I warned you." She took a hesitant step forward, the floorboards creaking beneath her feet. "Step." Her expression was a mix of curiosity and apprehension as she ventured deeper into the unknown. Asura wandered down the hallway, her hand trailing along the wall. "This is so mysterious," she thought, her eyes wide with curiosity. "My head was a mess earlier," she mused, "but it's all gone now." A small smile touched her lips. "Tasty food is awesome," she murmured, remembering the delicious meal she had just enjoyed. She paused, her fingers gently touching the intricate details of a nearby carving. "Touch!" Asura continued her exploration, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns on the walls. "Tasty food is awesome," she mused, a contented smile on her face. Suddenly, a wave of determination washed over her. "But I'm not stupid, you know," she thought, her eyes hardening. "I will escape before he sells me." She paused, considering her options. "I'll watch for a chance to, She trailed off, realizing she didn't have a concrete plan. "Chef, I don't know." Despite her uncertainty, a spark of defiance flickered in her eyes. Asura stepped out onto a balcony overlooking a vibrant scene. "It's so lively," she observed, taking in the colorful decorations and bustling activity below. "Almost like a festival, and colorful," she mused, her eyes wide with wonder. She leaned over the railing, fascinated by the large koi fish swimming in the pond below. "It's floating?" she exclaimed in surprise. Asura gazed at the lively scene below, her expression a mixture of wonder and longing. "Although I have never been to a festival before," she thought, a touch of sadness in her eyes. The festive atmosphere and the sense of community it evoked stirred a deep yearning within her. Asura gazed at the vibrant scene before her, her heart filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "If I become an oiran," she wondered, "will I get to live a more human life?" The question lingered in her mind, a beacon of both promise and doubt as she contemplated the uncertain path ahead. Asura's eyes widened in alarm as she heard a sudden commotion. "Huh?" she gasped, her head whipping around to find the source of the noise. A shamisen lay discarded on the ground, its strings vibrating ominously. A figure with a menacing grin loomed in the doorway, casting an unsettling shadow over the scene. Asura paused, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I feel like I've heard it before," she thought, straining to place the haunting melody drifting through the air. The music seemed to stir a distant memory, a fleeting image of a woman cradling a smiling child. "This song," she murmured, her heart aching with a strange sense of longing and familiarity. Asura's eyes widened in disbelief as a woman stepped through the doorway, her silhouette bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. "Mom?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and uncertainty. The woman, her back turned, gazed out at the peaceful landscape, seemingly unaware of the child's presence. A hand reached out, fingers splayed, as if trying to grasp something intangible. Light shimmered around the outstretched hand, illuminating the delicate details of the nearby shoji screen. A pair of eyes, wide with curiosity and a hint of fear, watched the scene unfold, their gaze fixed on the mysterious glow emanating from the hand. Asura stepped into the room, her eyes widening in surprise at the sight before her. Several women in elaborate kimonos sat around a low table, their faces etched with concern as they watched a man tending to an unconscious girl. "Hugh?" Asura murmured, her voice barely a whisper. The room was filled with a palpable tension, the silence broken only by the gentle clinking of teacups and the rustle of fabric. Yahello cradled Asura's limp body in his arms, his expression a mixture of concern and frustration. "Kaya," he muttered, his voice laced with worry. The women surrounding them gasped in alarm, their faces etched with shock and fear. The air was thick with tension as they watched Yahello gently lay Asura down, her unconscious form a stark contrast to the vibrant colors of her surroundings. A loud KO, boom, echoed through the building as something slammed against the door of the koi room. The impact shook the frame, causing visible damage to the ornate sign above it. The commotion inside hinted at a chaotic struggle, the sounds of splintering wood and panicked shouts muffled by the thick wooden door. Yahello burst through the door, his face a mask of fury. "You guys!" he growled, his voice dangerously low. He grabbed one of the men by the collar, lifting him off the ground. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he snarled, his anger palpable. The room fell silent, the other men cowering in fear as Yahello's rage filled the air. A piercing scream, "Kya!" ripped through the air, its intensity echoing through the surrounding space. The sound was filled with terror and urgency, suggesting a sudden and shocking event had unfolded. The stark contrast of the white space against the dark, dynamic lines further emphasized the dramatic impact of the scream. Yahello smirked, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "I didn't tell her not to go there," he mused, a hint of amusement in his voice. He casually adjusted his mask, feigning innocence. "There's an important guest in the koi room," he mimicked, recalling his earlier words. Nearby, a man bowed respectfully. "Sagami-sama," he greeted. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, their pace quickening with each stride. "Da-dun, da-dun." Yahello paused outside the koi room, his hand hovering over the door. "Now then," he muttered, a sly grin spreading across his face. He slid the door open, revealing a dimly lit room with a balcony overlooking a pond filled with koi. A bowl of dice sat on a nearby table, hinting at the gambling taking place within. Yahello stormed into the room, his expression a mixture of shock and anger. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice booming through the tense silence. The men scattered, their faces pale with fear. "Sagami-sama," one stammered, bowing deeply. Yahello's eyes darted around the room, taking in the scene of chaos and destruction. "Explain yourselves," he roared, his voice laced with fury. Chaos erupted as a figure burst into the room, scattering the startled occupants. Thud, thud. "Wah, are you even listening?" one of them exclaimed, their voice filled with disbelief. Another, eyes wide with surprise, pointed towards a plate of food. "What's that? This meat, right?" they questioned. Amidst the confusion, a girl reached out with a determined glint in her eyes. "Whatever," she declared. "Give me some of that too." Yahello watched the commotion unfold, a bemused expression on his face. "He may even become my customer, you know," he remarked, observing the newcomer with interest. One of the men, startled by the girl's sudden appearance and brash demand for food, admonished her. "You're being rude to our guest," he scolded. Unfazed, the girl continued to clamor for the meat, her hunger overriding any social graces. "Jaya, I don't care," she shouted back, her voice filled with defiance. Yahello glanced at the untouched plate of food in front of the newcomer, a curious expression on his face. "Why haven't you even touched your food?" he inquired, a hint of concern in his voice. It's getting cold. He leaned closer, his tone shifting to one of playful amusement. More importantly, he added, "You're a customer, aren't you?" The newcomer, flustered by the attention, blushed and stammered, their eyes darting nervously between Yahello and the tempting spread of food before them. Yahello reached out and grabbed the newcomer's hand, his grip firm. "Grab!" The newcomer flinched, startled by the sudden contact. "Hiss!" Yahello leaned closer, his masked face inches away. Jolt! He released the newcomer's hand abruptly, leaving them trembling slightly. "Release!" Asura glared at the newcomer, her expression a mixture of annoyance and defiance. "If you don't want it, I'll eat it all, okay?" she declared, her voice sharp. She gestured towards the untouched food with a dramatic flourish. "Sagami said that the food here is second to none," she reminded them, emphasizing the quality of the meal. "Stop drinking with that straight face and eat some," she ordered, her tone brooking no argument. Yahello, intrigued, watched the newcomer closely. "Why haven't you touched your food?" he questioned, his masked face betraying no emotion. "Are you dumb?" he pressed, leaning closer. The newcomer, overwhelmed by the chaos and Yahello's intense gaze, stammered, "Huh, food." The newcomer's eyes widened in shock as they took in their surroundings. "It's a brothel," they murmured, their voice barely a whisper. A woman nearby overheard and whirled around, her face contorted in anger. "Just what kind of place do you think this is?" she hissed, her voice laced with indignation. "Hey, you!" she snarled, stepping closer with a menacing glint in her eyes. The woman slid open her kimono slightly, revealing a glimpse of her elaborate attire underneath. "Slide. Everyone comes here for prostitutes like us," she stated matter-of-factly. "Food and drinks come second." Her expression was a mix of confidence and allure, a practiced mask for the role she played within the establishment. The woman grabbed Asura's arm, pulling her closer with a rough yank. "Yank!" Asura winced, her face contorted in a grimace. "But you know," she began, her voice strained. "I already know that," she finished, her tone firm despite the uncomfortable situation. The man observing the scene sighed, his expression a mix of weariness and resignation. "Sigh!" The command, "Get out," echoed through the room, its force silencing any other sound. The words hung heavy in the air, leaving no room for argument or negotiation. A hand reached out, fingers firmly gripping a small cup, the gesture hinting at a tense and potentially dangerous confrontation. The newcomers stood frozen, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion as they surveyed the room. Yahello and the others watched them expectantly, a tense silence hanging in the air. "I don't even know why she's here," one of the women whispered, her voice laced with uncertainty. "That's right, sir," another confirmed, a hint of worry in her tone. The newcomer remained silent, seemingly overwhelmed by the situation. Yahello pointed a finger accusingly at the newcomer. "You're the one I don't want here," he declared, his voice filled with authority. "Turn around and leave." The newcomer, startled by his sudden outburst, flinched. "Point!" A look of confusion and hurt crossed their face as they processed his harsh words. The newcomer confidently declared their business intentions, implying a possible misunderstanding of their status. A woman retorted, questioning their awareness of the establishment's purpose, while another lamented the perceived decline of Sagami. The newcomers stood tall, a confident smirk playing on their lips. "Well, guess I'm going too," they declared, unfazed by the tense atmosphere. "I will leave as you wish." They turned to depart, a sense of quiet dignity in their stride. "Sneak!" Their footsteps echoed softly as they slipped away, leaving behind a palpable silence in their wake. A man's voice cut through the tense silence, sharp and commanding. "Hold on," he ordered, his tone brooking no disobedience. His hand reached out, fingers closing tightly around a cup, as if bracing for a confrontation. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation, the unspoken threat hanging heavy in the air. Yahiro's expression softened as he looked at the newcomer. "Why don't you keep me company over this meal?" he offered, a gentle smile gracing his lips. He gestured towards the untouched food, his tone inviting. "You're leaving an important guest all by himself?" he added, feigning a hurt expression. The newcomer paused, their eyes widening in surprise at the unexpected invitation. The newcomer sat fidgeting nervously, their hands clasped tightly in their lap. Squirm, squirm. They glanced around the room, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. That was a feast, they thought, recalling the lavish spread of food they had just been offered. Their gaze lingered on a nearby table, where a delicate teacup and saucer sat untouched. Yahiro and the newcomer sat facing each other in a silent room. The newcomer, visibly uncomfortable, fidgeted nervously. "You," they mumbled, their gaze darting around the unfamiliar surroundings. Yahiro observed them with a patient, almost amused expression. Silent, he noted to himself that despite their initial hesitation, the newcomer had eventually finished the entire meal. He ate everything in the end, he thought, a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. Asura sat on the floor, her legs numb from kneeling for so long. "My legs got numb," she thought ruefully. She looked up at the newcomer with a frustrated expression. "And he's kind of a fussy guy," she grumbled to herself. She began to regret her decision to stay. "I should have just run away without expecting I'd get any food," she mused, her stomach growling in protest. Yahiro sat across from the newcomer, a subtle smile playing on his lips. He watched as the newcomer fidgeted nervously, their eyes darting around the room. And why is he so silent? Yahiro wondered to himself, amused by their obvious discomfort. A faint scent wafted through the air, adding another layer to the already tense atmosphere. Waft! Asura sat across from the newcomer, her brow furrowed in concentration. This distinctive sweet smell, she thought, sniffing the air with a curious expression. Her eyes narrowed as she focused on the newcomer. "Does it come from you?" she wondered, a hint of suspicion creeping into her gaze. Asura, with a curious expression, sniffs the air. "Smell?" she questions, sensing a distinctive scent. "What do you mean by human?" she asks, her brow furrowed in confusion. Yahiro, holding a fan, recounts a conversation about a pawn shop in the 2nd District that claimed to have a human woman in stock. The pawn shop in the 2nd District, he recalls, said something about having a human woman in stock. He explains that the newcomer's unusual attire and scent triggered his suspicion. "It made me think," he adds, "you are wearing strange clothes."